So chances are you've probably heard of weird woman literature, but what exactly does that mean? And what should you be reading if you want to get started with weird women lit? Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So I would consider myself a connoisseur of weird woman literature. I read quite a lot of it and have for the past 5 or 6 years. And I think I have gotten progressively more experimental in my taste with weird woman literature, exploring with weirder books that kind of fall into a magical realism category or a horror category, not just subversive women who don't follow the rules in regular day-to-day life. But all of those things are contained in this idea of weird woman literature. So my interpretation of what weird woman lit is it's any book about a woman who is subverting expectations of womanhood. So the range of what this means is kind of large. Usually it features a female main character who is either unlikable or unreliable in some way, and them being kind of unlikable plays into this idea of what we find unlikable in women as a society and tries to kind of push against those boundaries. They often explore female rage and identity. Many that I've read explore the domestic sphere, so subverting expectations of motherhood and marriage. But many of them also explore themes of mental health, lust, and obsession. So to be honest, I've talked about a lot of these type of books on my channel before just because it's what I tend to read. So some of the quintessential weird woman authors that you might think of are Ottessa Moshfegh and Mona Awad. So now that you understand a little bit better what weird woman lit is and the range that it can take, I'd like to share a couple of weird woman books with you. So these I would consider the quintessential reads, and that they are the baseline, everybody reads these type of reads. I've talked about Mona Awad, I've talked about Ottessa Moshfegh many times on my channel. I do have a video from a couple years back where I kind of give some recommendations of some more quintessential weird woman books to start with, so I will link that below and in the card above if you're interested in checking that out. But in this video, I just want to share 5 weird books for weird girls that I have read recently. Okay, so the first book I want to talk about is Beta Vulgaris by Margie Sarsfield. So this book follows Elise, and she and her boyfriend are headed to a beet harvest. They're driving from Brooklyn to Minnesota, and when they arrive, things start feeling a little bit off and strange as she believes that the beets may be talking to her, and also people begin to disappear from the beet harvest, and their disappearances feel suspicious to Elise. So I would consider this a weird woman book because it features a female protagonist who is struggling mental health wise and begins to see things that may or may not be there. So it kind of plays with the surreal and the magical realism elements, but it's not super clear whether those things are really happening or happening in her head. A lot of weird woman books experiment with reality and whether or not what is happening in the person's mind or in real life. I also find this character to be really funny and witty. She has a lot of kind of one-liners and zingers throughout the book that I really loved. Her main struggle throughout the book is her disordered eating and the ways that that takes shape. She talks a lot about how many calories are in things, in restricting, but it kind of makes for a cornerstone character point that she pulls into her humor. For example, they're driving and she sees a billboard that advertises Jesus as the bread of life, and in parentheses she writes caloric content unknown. Those kind of comments make her a really witty and interesting character, and I connected with her immediately. She also may have some OCD tendencies or just anxiety, specifically around whether or not she's a good person. She worries that she's a snob, she worries that she's racist, she worries that she is bad or evil in some way, and she's always trying to find reasons to believe so. And she tries so hard to be a good person. She is a vegetarian, she's very health conscious, she's very environment conscious. She is trying to do a lot to be a good person and to appear like a moral person, even though she worries that she's not, which I think is a relatable struggle for many of us. So her weirdness isn't really that weird until we get into this surrealist element. I think that that's another cornerstone of weird woman literature, is that the things that we're considering weird are really just common facets of womanhood, struggles with womanhood, mental illness, just things that people experience all the time, but they feel subversive because in literature and in overall the literary canon, we have seen a lot of pristine and perfect women. Also in media, film, TV, all of that, we're presented with an image of what a woman should look like and be, and it feels subversive to see real women existing, even if it's in a novel or in a fiction sense. Women that are portrayed more realistically with real struggles and real mental illnesses and just real experiences with being a woman in the world, they feel like a rebellion. So for her, I feel like Elise is kind of a character who we can relate to in many ways, and she's not that weird, but she feels weird when we compare her to what the rest of the literary canon expects of women, if that makes sense at all. So that's kind of why this is a weird woman book. But just in terms of my recommendation of this book, I highly recommend it. I think that it is witty and subversive and funny and surreal and weird, and it just has a lot of those classic weird woman elements. But I love the writing, I love the humor, I love the pacing of this book, and I love the kind of weird twist at the end. So I highly recommend Beta Vulgaris. It's one of my favorite weird woman books. Okay, my next recommendation is kind of a weird sexuality book, and it is Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. So this is an aspect of weird woman books that I think is being explored more lately, but it is very subversive in that it kind of explores a counterculture of sexuality. In this case, very weird. So our main character, Linda, is obsessed with planes, and she is attracted to planes. So she really wants to marry a plane, and the only way to do that in her mind is to go down in a plane crash with said plane who would be choosing her to marry in that scenario. So the book follows her as she tries to fly back and forth and get a plane to choose her to marry. It also talks a little bit about her work life, her loneliness, and the attempt to kind of be with a man instead of a plane, to kind of try to be normal. So I actually read this one on a plane, which was a really funny choice. People basically warned me not to do that because it does get pretty intense related to planes. So it was a little bit weird. And certainly this is one of the weirder ones that I've read in terms of sexuality and, being sexually obsessed with an inanimate object. That is something that definitely isn't explored in many books that I have read thus far. But this book is a great example of how authors can push the boundaries of weird women literature and explore desire and sexuality and longing. It also talks a lot about wanting to be accepted for who you are. She kind of tries to develop friendships with people and let them in small increments into who she really is, but people just find her intolerable and too strange to be around until she finds one friend who kind of sticks it out with her. So it's really interesting in that way too, of exploring this idea of wanting to share who you are but feeling like you won't be accepted for that. It really pushes on that boundary of what is acceptable and what you should hope other people would accept in you. Is she too weird to be accepted? But I thought that this one was just the right amount of subversive for a love story, and I thought that the main character was, if anything, just really interesting to read about and one of the most memorable characters I've ever read. I think that the weird woman genre is just such a great place to explore the boundaries of what is acceptable, whether that is identity-wise or sexuality-wise, different aspects like that. It provides a lens through which to look at these characters, and I think that that's really interesting. So yeah, highly recommend this one if you are open to some serious weirdness. Okay, so the next one I'm going to recommend is also kind of an obsession love story, and it is Open Wide by Jessica Gross. So this one follows a woman named Olive, and she has been single for a while looking for the right guy. But this man named Theo turns up at a volunteer shift that she does at a food pantry, and they have a bit of a connection, but Olive has a bit of a secret. She is confounded by relationships and struggles to get a hold of the social cues, so she actually records lots of different conversations that she has and comes back to them later. And as their relationship blossoms, we see that Theo is really interested in understanding her, which she doesn't feel like many people have tried to do. Olive is obsessed with Theo, wanting to spend every waking moment with him. Their relationship is kind of dark and ominous and toxic, but she's obsessed with the gap in his front teeth. And one day she decides to open up the gap in his teeth and is able to literally crawl inside of him. So there are elements of the surreal here, obviously. There is some magic involved in how this is possible, but it explores things like boundaries and consent related to her kind of recording people with them not knowing, and also her literally getting inside of someone's body when he's asleep. So it kind of blurs the lines between intimacy and possession and explores the desire to be deeply known and understood. So I don't think I have to tell you why this is a Weird Woman book. I mean, she literally climbs inside of her boyfriend. But the exploration of obsession and toxic love is kind of common in Weird Woman literature, so I just wanted to point this out as a really good example of that. I also love her book Hysteria. I read that one first and then read this one because this one just came out recently. So I would also consider Gross as a Weird Woman author who explores different aspects of female sexuality through her books. So yeah, this is my third recommendation. Okay, next up we are diving a little bit further into the horror territory, and this one is Chlorine by Jade Song. So this is what I would consider girlhood horror, which in my opinion centers around the horrors of becoming a woman, whether that has to do with men or changes in your body, autonomy, different things that young girls have to face as they become a woman. So this one follows Ren Yu, and she is a swimmer who is completely obsessed with the water. She basically wants to be a mermaid, and her family is kind of divided. She feels that in order to keep her family together, keep them happy with her, she needs to be this amazing swimmer. She also has a very creepy coach who she feels that she needs to impress. And there also are some themes and discussions around the Asian American experience and how that plays into expectations in her family. But where this one really gets weird is her obsession with mermaids and the desire to actually become a mermaid. And I will say that this is one of the grossest books that I've read in terms of body horror. I also love that this book talks so openly about the kind of funny and grotesque elements of becoming a woman. So there is a scene in this book where she needs to put in a tampon to go and swim for her swim meet, and she's really struggling to do so and calls another teammate in to help her, and it gets very descriptive about that experience. So there are some kind of funny and gross moments about girlhood and learning how to take care of a woman's body. So that is also a quintessential aspect of girlhood horror in my opinion. This one also has some sapphic longings as well. Our main character kind of couldn't be bothered with some of the romantic things, but has a sort of intense relationship with one of her teammates. And we also get some passages from the teammate's perspective who professes her love to our main character. Being a teenager, Ren does also kind of explore her sexuality with boys as well. So we get some scenes of sort of awkward fumblings that happen in teenagerhood. It's about becoming who you've always wanted to be, transformation, and the expectations placed on the female body. So our main character has so many relatable elements, but those kind of turn into something monstrous by the end of this book, and I thought that that was really interesting. This is also this author's debut novel, which I think is incredible. It is such a well done book. But yeah, I don't really have to explain why this is a Weird Woman book. She is quintessentially weird in that she has a intense and obsessive desire, and she will do anything to get it, even alter her body permanently. So if you're okay with some body horror kind of elements, Chlorine is such an amazing book. It is one of my favorite books I've read so far this year. Okay, so my fifth and final recommendation for today is Tantrum by Rachel Eve Moulton. So as I said earlier, a lot of Weird Woman books kind of subvert expectations around motherhood and the domestic. So this is a perfect example of that type of book. The book follows Thea, who is a mom to 3 children, and her husband is kind of an average guy. He is somewhat helpful, but not an outstanding father. And her 2 boys, her first 2 kids, are sweet and innocent and easy, and then her daughter, who is her 3rd baby, has some kind of monstrous tendencies. So the first section of this book is a little bit more realistic. It focuses on the struggles with motherhood, transitioning from 2 to 3 kids, and with the idea of being a mother at all. Thea never thought she would be a mom. She was scared of passing on some of the monstrous aspects of herself and her mother, and so she almost never had kids, and she's sort of dealing with the transition in identity. And her youngest daughter exhibits some kind of scary traits. She is stronger than she should be at 13 weeks old. She's able to speak. Later on, we see her walk at that age. She's violent towards other people, and she was born with a full set of teeth. So she's a creepy kid. And in the first section, we can't really tell whether a lot of the fear that Thea has of her daughter is kind of rooted in reality or something that she is projecting. And then the second section, things get really weird and surreal. So there are some elements in this book that are quite trippy, and you still aren't sure whether this is happening in her head or happening in real life, but it gets much more surreal than the first section. So I will say that it is kind of a bit of a turn, but overall the book does a really good job of exploring generational trauma and the wounds that mothers pass to their daughters. We meet Thea's mother through her memories and also in person, and see the ways that her mother abused her as a child and neglected her, and also made her hold all of this trauma that she had. And in turn, Thea is scared of traumatizing her daughter. She's scared that her daughter will consume all of her grief and pain, and then Thea must methodically work to heal her daughter from the inside out. So in a way, it's about breaking generational curses and stopping the pattern. But this is a great example of motherhood horror and mommy issues in Weird Woman Lit. So on the surface, it's a book about a mother who is struggling to adjust to her new identity, but it goes so much deeper in exploring generational trauma and suggesting that there's something monstrous lurking in all of us. So this was a shining example of a Weird Woman book, and I just recently read it, and I just keep thinking about it, so I wanted to share it with you. Okay, so those were 5 weird books for weird girls. I hope that you enjoyed this video. It was really fun talking to you about these books. These are all some of my favorite books. Let me know if you're interested in a part 2 to this video where I recommend 5 more Weird Woman books. But if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.